It was a rainy Thursday in November when Florence Scovel Shinn received a distraught woman in her office. Her eyes were red from crying, and her hands trembled as she clutched a damp tissue. "Please, Mrs. Shinn," she pleaded. "My sister-in-law is destroying my life. She spreads lies about me, manipulates my husband against me, and even tried to sabotage me at work. I've tried everything. I've talked. I pleaded. I even sued. Nothing works. She seems to feed off my suffering." Florence observed the woman silently for a few seconds, then rose and walked to the window. Outside, the rain hammered against the glass as if trying to break in. She turned slowly and said something that would forever change not only that woman's life, but the lives of thousands who would learn this technique in the decades to follow. "Dearest," she began, her voice soft yet firm, "you're fighting the wrong battle. It's not against your sister-in-law that you need to fight. It's against the energy she represents in your life. And there's a way to completely neutralize that energy without her even realizing what's happening." The woman looked up, confused but hopeful. Florence sat back down and picked up a small brown leather journal she always kept on her desk. This journal contained notes from years of study on the spiritual laws that govern our universe. She opened it to a specific page, marked with a faded red ribbon. "I'm going to teach you something I learned after years of observing how energy flows between people," Florence continued. "When someone attacks us, whether physically, emotionally, or spiritually, we automatically create an energetic connection with that person. It's like an invisible cord that binds us. The more we fight, resist, or hate, the stronger that cord becomes." The woman nodded, beginning to understand. Florence took 2 pencils from her desk and placed them facing each other. "Imagine this pencil is you, and this one is your sister-in-law. When she attacks you, and you react with anger, fear, or sadness, you two become like this." He pushed the pencils against each other, creating resistance. "But when you apply the technique I'm going to teach you, this happens." He gently moved one pencil to the side, causing the other to fall softly onto the desk. Without resistance, there's no conflict. Without conflict, there's no energy to fuel the attack. Florence then shared the complete technique, word for word, exactly as it had been revealed to her during the years of meditation and study of universal laws. "The first part of the technique is the most difficult," she warned. "You need to genuinely forgive the person. Not a superficial forgiveness, but a forgiveness that comes from the depths of your soul. You need to understand that this person is acting out of their own suffering, their own fears, their own unhealed wounds." The woman frowned. "But how can I forgive someone who deliberately hurts me so much?" Florence smiled understandingly. "That's precisely why this is the most powerful part of the technique. When you truly forgive, you cut the energetic cord that binds you two. She can no longer feed off your energy because you're no longer vibrating on the same frequency as her. It's like trying to tune into a radio station that has changed frequencies. It simply doesn't work anymore." The second part of the technique involved a specific affirmation that should be repeated mentally whenever the person thought of their enemy or when they knew they would encounter that person. The affirmation was simple but powerful, based on deep metaphysical principles that Florence had studied for decades. "I bless you with divine love and release you to your highest happiness. You are free, and I am free. There is nothing between us but love and perfect understanding." Florence explained that this affirmation worked on multiple levels. First, by blessing the person with divine love, You were literally sending positive energy that neutralized any negative energy directed at you. It was like throwing water on a fire. Second, by releasing the person to their highest happiness, you were removing any energetic hook that kept you trapped in a cycle of conflict. Third, by affirming that you both were free, you were invoking the universal law of freedom, which is one of the most powerful laws in the universe. But there's a secret to this technique that almost nobody knows. Florence continued, her eyes shining with the accumulated wisdom of years. You need to visualize the person surrounded by a golden light while repeating the affirmation. This golden light represents divine love in its purest form. When you can truly see your enemy enveloped in this light, something magical happens. The person begins to change their behavior toward you, often in a dramatic and inexplicable way. The woman was fascinated but still skeptical. "I've seen this work hundreds of times," Florence assured her. "Once one of my students had a boss who constantly harassed her. He humiliated her in meetings, criticized all her work, and was clearly trying to make her quit. She applied this technique for exactly 3 weeks. At the end of the 3rd week, the boss called her into his office. She went in prepared to be fired. Instead, he apologized for his behavior and offered her a promotion. He said he didn't know what had happened to him, but that he suddenly realized how unjust he had been." Florence continued with more examples. There was the case of 2 sisters who hadn't spoken for 10 years because of an inheritance. One of them learned this technique and practiced it faithfully. 2 months later at Christmas, her sister showed up at her door with tears in her eyes, asking for forgiveness and suggesting they split the inheritance equally. There was also the case of neighbors who hated each other so much that they had built increasingly higher walls between their houses. When one of them started practicing the technique, the other sold their house and moved away. But before that, they came to apologize and left a parting gift. The 3rd part of the technique was perhaps the most subtle but equally important. You need to act as if the person were already your friend, Florence explained. I'm not saying you should go hug her or invite her to dinner, but when you think of her, think as you would of a distant friend. When you speak of her to others, don't tell the negative stories. Simply say that you are resolving your differences, or change the subject. This shift in your mental field creates ripples in the quantum field that eventually reach the other person. The woman who had arrived desperate now had a glimmer of hope in her eyes. But what if she continues to attack me while I'm practicing the technique? It's normal, Florence replied. Sometimes the person even intensifies the attacks at first. It's like the last gasp of dying energy. Don't react. Just continue with the technique. Remember, you're not doing this to change the other person. You're doing this to change the energy between you. When the energy shifts, the person has no choice but to change too. Or to leave your life. Florence then shared the deeper aspect of the technique. Something she rarely taught, but felt this woman was ready to hear. The truth is, our enemies are our greatest spiritual teachers, she said softly. They show us where we still have work to do on ourselves. Your sister-in-law is showing you something about yourself that needs healing. Perhaps it's your need for approval, your fear of confrontation, or your difficulty setting boundaries. When you heal that in yourself, the mirror that is your sister-in-law has nothing left to reflect. The woman began to cry, but this time they were tears of relief and understanding. Florence gently took her hand. There's a specific prayer you can say before bed, she offered. This prayer seals the day's energetic work and accelerates the neutralization process. The prayer was, divine love, transform all negative energy directed at me into blessings. May those who wish me ill find peace in their hearts. May those who attack me find love in their souls. And may I be a channel of forgiveness and compassion, transforming darkness into light wherever I go. Florence explained that this prayer acted like an energetic shield, not only protecting, but also transmuting negative energies. It was based on the Hermetic law of transmutation, which states that all energy can be transformed from one form to another. When you pray, asking for negative energy to be transformed into blessings, you are literally changing the quality of the energy flowing between you and your enemy. The woman carefully wrote everything down in a small journal she took from her purse. Florence observed and added another crucial piece of information. There are signs that the technique is working, she said. First, you'll start dreaming about the person differently. The dreams will be more peaceful, sometimes even friendly. Second, you'll think less about the person during the day. Third, when you think of her, you won't feel that stomach clenching or tightness in your chest anymore. Fourth, other people will start commenting that the person has changed or that she's acting differently. And finally, the person herself will change her behavior towards you, sometimes so dramatically that others won't believe it. Florence also warned about the most common mistakes people made when applying the technique. The biggest mistake is doing the technique expecting a specific outcome. She explained, you need to completely release the outcome. Maybe the person will become your friend. Maybe she'll simply leave your life. Maybe she'll stay around but stop bothering you. The universe always chooses the highest solution for everyone involved. Trust that. Another common mistake was giving up too early. Florence had observed that most significant changes happened between 21 and 40 days of consistent practice. But some people gave up after a week, when they didn't see immediate results. It's like planting a seed, she explained. You don't dig up the seed every day to see if it's growing. You water it, give it light, and trust the process. The technique works the same way. The conversation in that office lasted another 2 hours. Florence shared nuances and subtleties of the technique she had refined over the years. She explained how the technique could be adapted for different types of enemies, from difficult co-workers to toxic family members, and even to neutralize negative energies from entire groups of people. One of the most fascinating aspects Florence revealed was how the technique worked at the quantum level. When we observe someone with love and compassion, we are literally collapsing quantum possibilities into a reality where that person acts with love and compassion in return. It's quantum physics applied to human relationships. The observer affects the observed. When we change how we observe our enemies, we change how they behave in our reality. She also explained that the technique had ancient roots, found in sacred texts from various traditions. The Essenes practiced something similar. Jesus taught about loving your enemies. Buddha spoke about compassion for all beings. The Sufis have practices of transforming poison into medicine. This technique is the practical distillation of all this ancient wisdom, adapted for the modern mind. The woman asked about extreme situations, where there was real physical danger. Florence was clear in her response. This technique does not replace practical safety measures. If someone is physically threatening you, contact the authorities. Move if necessary. Take all practical steps for your safety. But do the technique in parallel. You'd be surprised how many dangerous situations dissolve when the energy is neutralized. I've seen cases of stalkers who simply lost interest. of violent ex-husbands who suddenly accepted the divorce peacefully, of aggressive neighbors who unexpectedly moved away. Florence then shared a particularly powerful story. A woman had sought her help because her ex-husband was trying to take custody of her children through lies and legal manipulations. The situation seemed impossible. He had more financial resources, had hired the best lawyers, and was fabricating evidence against her. Florence taught her the technique with a specific instruction. Every time she thought about her ex-husband or had to deal with anything related to the process, she should first do the golden light visualization and repeat the affirmation. The woman practiced religiously for 6 weeks. At the final hearing, something extraordinary happened. The ex-husband stood up and told the judge he had reconsidered everything and that the children should stay with their mother. He withdrew all charges and agreed to pay full alimony. His own lawyers were shocked. Later, he called his ex-wife and said he couldn't explain it, but that he suddenly felt an inexplicable peace and realized he was acting out of revenge, not for the good of the children. Florence emphasized that cases like this were not rare. She had dozens of documented stories of similar transformations. What people don't understand is that when you neutralize negative energy, you're not just changing the other person, you're changing the entire energy field around the situation. Other people involved begin to act differently. Circumstances align in unexpected ways. Doors open where before there were only walls. He also talked about the cascading effect of the technique. When you neutralize an enemy, it affects your entire life. Your overall energy increases because you're no longer wasting energy on conflict. Your health improves because stress decreases. Other relationships improve because you're vibrating at a higher frequency. New opportunities appear because you're no longer trapped in victim-aggressor patterns. It's like removing a stone that was blocking a river. Suddenly, everything flows better. The woman was ready to leave, but Florence had one more important thing to share. There's a test you can do to know if you've truly forgiven and neutralized the energy. Imagine you're at a party, and this person walks in. If you feel any tension, any change in your breathing, any urge to leave or confront, then there's still work to do. When the technique is complete, you can be in the same room as the person and feel genuine neutrality, maybe even a slight compassion. It's as if they're just another person in the world, without any special positive or negative charge for you. Florence also gave specific instructions on how to intensify the technique in particularly difficult cases. If the person is especially persistent in their attacks, you can do the technique 3 times a day. Morning when you wake up, midday, and night before bed. You can also write the affirmation 40 times a day for 40 days. Repetition creates new neural pathways in your brain and reinforces the new energy pattern you're establishing. Another secret Florence shared was about the power of silence. Don't tell anyone you're doing this technique, especially not the target person. Energy work is more powerful when done in secret. It's like a seed germinating in the darkness of the earth. If you expose it to light too early, it dies. Let the technique work in silence until the results are so obvious that everyone notices. The woman asked one final question before leaving. What if I can't feel genuine love for the person? What if forgiveness seems impossible? Florence smiled with infinite understanding. Start where you are. If you can't feel love, start with neutrality. If you can't forgive, start by accepting that the person exists. Use the affirmation even if you don't feel it completely at first. Repetition creates reality. Over time, words become feeling. feeling becomes belief, and belief becomes reality. 6 months later, the woman returned to Florence's office. She was unrecognizable. Her eyes shone, her posture was erect and confident, and she emanated a peace that was palpable. "I came to thank you and tell you what happened," she said, barely able to contain her emotion. "I practiced the technique exactly as you taught me. For 2 weeks, nothing changed. In fact, my sister-in-law seemed even worse. But I continued. In the 3rd week, she stopped speaking ill of me. In the 4th week, she greeted me at a family dinner. In the 6th week, she called me crying, asking forgiveness for everything she had done. Today we are not only cordial, we are friends. She even confided in me that she had been suffering from severe depression during all those years of conflict, and that attacking others was the only way she knew how to cope with her own pain." Florence wasn't surprised. She had seen this transformation hundreds of times. What always moved her was seeing the power of love and forgiveness in action. Each time someone successfully applied the technique, it was living proof that love is truly the most powerful force in the universe, capable of transmuting any negative energy into light. This woman's story spread. Other people began seeking out Florence to learn the technique. Over time, she refined and perfected the method, adapting it to different situations and personalities. She discovered that the technique worked not only with personal enemies, but also with negative situations, financial blocks, and even illnesses that had emotional roots. One of the most interesting developments was when Florence discovered that the technique could be used preventively. "You don't have to wait to have an enemy to use this," she taught. "You can send golden light and blessings to all the people in your life regularly. This creates a field of protection around you that literally prevents negative energies from forming. It's like an energetic vaccination. If you're listening to this now and have someone in your life who is causing suffering, know that you have in your hands a powerful tool of transformation. It's not magic, although it seems like magic when it works. It's the practical application of universal laws that govern how energy flows between human beings. When you change your energy in relation to someone, you force that person to change their energy in relation to you. It's as inevitable as the law of gravity. Perhaps you're skeptical. Perhaps it seems too good to be true that you can neutralize an enemy without confrontation, without struggle, without even a conversation. But think about it. How many times have you already tried the path of conflict? How many times has direct confrontation, anger, resentment really solved the problem? If those methods worked, you wouldn't be here looking for an alternative. The truth that Florence Scovel Shinn discovered, and that thousands have confirmed since then, is that love is literally the most powerful force in the universe. Not a sentimental or romantic love, but love as a cosmic force of union and harmony. When you access this love and direct it even to your enemies, you are working with the very fabric of reality. You are using the same force that keeps the planets in orbit and makes flowers grow towards the sun. Start today. Choose the person who challenges you the most in your life. It could be a difficult boss, a bitter ex-partner, a toxic family member, a problematic neighbor. It doesn't matter who they are or what they've done. Apply the technique exactly as it was taught. Forgive genuinely, even if it seems impossible at first. Repeat the affirmation consistently. Visualize the person enveloped in golden light. Act as if the conflict is already resolved. Pray that all negativity is transformed into blessing. Give yourself 40 days. 40 days of consistent practice, without skipping a single day. Mark it on a calendar if necessary. Keep a journal recording any changes, however small. Note your dreams, your sensations, small signs of change. On the 41st day, look back and see what has changed. You will be surprised, maybe even shocked, by the transformation that has occurred. But here's an important warning. Once you discover that you can neutralize enemies with love, your whole life changes. You realize that you no longer need to live in conflict. You understand that you have the power to transmute any negative energy. You become a force of peace wherever you go. And this attracts people and situations of similar vibration into your life. You literally shift timelines, moving from a reality of conflict to a reality of harmony. Florence Scovel Shinn left this world in 1940, but her technique continues to live on, transforming lives nearly a century later. Each person who successfully applies this method becomes living proof that love conquers hate, that light dispels darkness, and that we have far more power over our reality than we ever imagined. If this knowledge resonated with you, if you felt that shiver of recognition that comes when we encounter a profound truth, then you are ready. Ready to stop fighting windmills, ready to step out of the cycle of attack and defense, ready to discover the extraordinary power that lies in neutralizing enemies through love. Remember Florence's words, your enemies are your teachers in disguise. They appear in your life to show you where you still need to grow, where you still need to heal, where you still need to love. When you learn the lesson, the teacher no longer has a reason to be there, or they transform into a friend, or simply disappear from your life. Their mission accomplished. The technique is now in your hands. The knowledge has been passed on. The choice to use it or not is entirely yours. But know that on the other side of applying this technique lies a life of far more peace, harmony, and personal power than you ever thought possible. A life where enemies become irrelevant because you've learned to transmute all negativity into light. This is Florence Scovel Shinn's legacy. This is the gift she left for humanity. Use it wisely. Use it with love. And watch in wonder as your greatest enemies transform into the most unexpected blessings of your life. There's something more that needs to be said about this technique. Something Florence only shared with her most dedicated students. The technique has layers of depth that reveal themselves as you practice. In the beginning, you're simply neutralizing conflict. But over time, you realize you're doing something far deeper. You are healing ancestral lines of conflict. Many of our enemies represent patterns that have been repeated in our family lineage for generations. When you neutralize an enemy with love, you are breaking that pattern for all future generations. Florence told the story of a woman whose grandparents, parents, and now herself had terrible problems with neighbors. It was like a family curse. Fence fights, legal disputes, even physical violence had occurred throughout the generations. When she applied the technique, not only did her problem with her neighbor resolve itself, but her teenage daughter, who was having problems with bullying at school, suddenly saw the bullies lose interest in her. Her son, who had a teacher who was persecuting him, saw the teacher get transferred. It was as if the entire family line had been cleansed of conflict patterns. This is the hidden power of the technique. When you neutralize an enemy, you're not just changing your present life, you are rewriting your energetic history, healing ancestral trauma, and creating a new template for future generations. It's deep soul work disguised as a simple technique. Florence also discovered that the technique worked retroactively. People reported that after practicing the technique for a few months, old enemies they hadn't seen in years contacted them asking for forgiveness. Ex-partners who had parted ways angrily returned to make amends. Bosses who had unfairly fired them called offering new opportunities. It was as if the energetic shift traveled through time, healing wounds of the past. One of the most powerful applications of the technique was with internal enemies. Florence taught that our greatest enemy is often ourselves, our inner critic, our patterns of self-sabotage, our tendency towards self-deprecation. When you apply the technique to yourself, sending love and forgiveness to your own shadows, the transformation is revolutionary. Addictions disappear. Destructive patterns dissolve. The critical voice becomes a voice of encouragement. There's also the collective aspect of the technique. When many people practice neutralization with love simultaneously, it creates a morphogenetic field of peace that affects the entire community. Florence organized groups where dozens of people practiced the technique together, each focusing on their own enemies, but creating a collective field of transformation. The results were extraordinary. Entire neighborhoods shifted in energy. Crime decreased. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in decades began to converse. The final secret that Florence revealed only to her most advanced students was about the role of the enemy in spiritual awakening. Our enemies are often our greatest spiritual activators. They force us to grow, to develop compassion, to transcend the ego. Without them, we would remain dormant in our spiritual comfort zone. When you understand this deeply, you not only neutralize your enemies, you silently thank them for the role they play in your evolution. There is an advanced version of the technique that Florence developed in the last years of her life. In addition to sending golden light, you visualize you and your enemy as small children playing together. This visualization accesses the state of original innocence before wounds and defenses were created. It is profoundly healing and often results in tears of release. People report dreaming of their enemies as children after practicing this version, and waking up with all resentment dissolved. Florence also discovered that the technique worked with collective enemies. Entire groups that were hostile could be neutralized. A woman who was the only woman in an office dominated by men who constantly sabotaged her applied the technique by visualizing the entire group, bathed in golden light. In 2 months, the office culture had completely changed. She was promoted and became a mentor for other women who were hired. The time of day you practice the technique also matters. Florence discovered that the most powerful time was during what she called the golden hours, shortly after dawn and shortly before sunset. At these times, the veil between worlds is thinner and the energetic work is amplified. If you can practice the technique during these times, the results are accelerated. There are physical signs that the technique is working that Florence documented. You may feel warmth in your chest when you think of the person. Your shoulders relax automatically. Your breathing deepens. You might even feel a tingling sensation in your hands, as if energy is flowing through you. These are signs that energetic transmutation is occurring. Florence also warned about what she called a healing crisis. Sometimes, right before the big change, there's a temporary intensification of conflict. It's like the darkness before dawn. The other person's ego is resisting the shift. If this happens, don't give up. It's a sign that transformation is near. Continue with the technique with even more dedication. One of the most extraordinary cases Florence documented involved two families locked in a 3-generation blood feud. Murders had occurred. The police were constantly involved. A young woman from one of the families learned the technique and practiced it secretly for 6 months. She didn't tell anyone in her family what she was doing. In the 7th month, the patriarchs of the two families met accidentally at a hospital where they were both visiting sick relatives. Instead of fighting, they talked. They discovered they were tired of the conflict. They arranged a peace dinner between the families. The vendetta, which seemed impossible to resolve, simply evaporated. This is the power of this technique when applied with dedication and faith. There is no enemy too strong, no conflict too old, no wound too deep that cannot be healed through consciously applied love. Florence Scovel Shinn left us the key to personal and collective peace. It's up to us to use it. If you've made it this far, listening to this message, know that it wasn't by chance. You were ready to receive this knowledge. Something in your soul recognizes the truth of what has been shared. Now, the question isn't whether the technique works. The question is, will you have the courage to apply it? Will you have the discipline to continue even when it seems like nothing is changing? Will you have the faith to trust the process even when your ego screams at you to fight? The choice is yours. But know that on the other side of this practice exists a version of you who no longer needs enemies. A version that has transformed all adversaries into teachers, all obstacles into opportunities, all darkness into light. That version of you already exists in the quantum field. Florence's technique is simply the pathway to finding her.